Today we've got a very bizarre game where a for-profit business has managed to develop a bunch of their game with free volunteers, and it's also the most wishlisted game on Steam, which I guess leads us to the question, do you think the community managers, QA testers, anti-cheat support, and localization staff should be paid for working on a for-profit project?
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
No, I haven't thought about it too much, but my instinctual emotional response is, of course, you can't just have volunteer labor on a video game at a scale like this. You can't just be doing that, or I guess can you?
Yeah.
Will people find it acceptable?
Fantastic, who are the people behind the most wishlisted game on Steam, very much think they can do that and that it's a reasonable thing to do. And as Well Played have highlighted, they're all volunteers, a whole bunch of their workforce. But they have one of the most bizarre definitions of volunteer that I think I have seen, and I think you're going to find this one to be pretty damn interesting. Okay, so Fantastic, our fully remote studio with headquarters in Singapore and a team across the world. They've released 2 games, they're working on a third one. The first one is called The Wild 8. It's an isometric wilderness survival game that supported co-op and single player. It was funded in Kickstarter, released on Steam. You can see there are mixed recent reviews, but mostly positive views overall, and it was published by Hype Train Digital. Okay. Then they do Prop Night, which is a prop hunt game. And, yeah, it's just mixed. Now, 10,000 reviews. Now, the thing with that is the common wisdom is, it's kind of sometimes, one review for every 63 sales, sometimes people say. So, no matter what way that you sort of cut it, the game's actually done quite well. Now, that said, when you look at footage, it does kind of look like an Unreal Engine Game Jam game. Yeah,
it's very much like they're asking a decent enough price because they've used, I guess, good-looking models and stuff, but it is just, hey, what's doing well? Dead by Daylight. What did well? Prop hunt. Mash them together. And then release them. And just be like, it's fun. We'll have a load of gameplay footage. Will be some streamers playing it. And that'll do.
Yeah. So now we look at the day before, which is the most wishlisted game on Steam. Okay? Set in deadly, post-pandemic America, overrun by flesh-hungry, infected, and survivors who are killing each other for resources. Wow. And if you want to know why it's the most wishlisted game in Steam, so thing number 1, right? Now, there's been this whole argument about graphics in games and how they don't matter. Wrong. They don't matter into gameplay sometimes, but they can matter. I mean, a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, if it didn't have such a ludicrously high amount of attention to detail and graphical fidelity, then its kind of slower style of gameplay would just feel awful, right? And then also, people genuinely they see shiny and they click. And when you look at this game, it looks shiny and people click, and they have. Also, it does tick off so many of the boxes. We have PvP, open world driving with some Splintires-esque mud mechanics. We've got temperature and thirst, Tarkov-style looting, base building, sound-based stealth, crafting including weapon mods, third-person shooting, but with no floaty damage like The Division has, MMO-ish, and a modern post-apocalyptic setting.
So it is basically what everyone in the world, on average, if you boiled everyone on the planet who played video games down to one person, this would be the perfect game for them, probably.
Yes, it's that thing. Everyone has wanted something like this since DayZ that has been stable and good and not buggy and not felt like an early access game. So no wonder you see one that looks gorgeous with a bunch of, pretty neat features like the Splintire style mud mechanics. And no wonder people wishlist. But there has been a bit of a controversy in the last few months because on the 5th of May, they revealed to IGN that the game has been delayed, that it's no longer releasing on the 21st of June 2022, and instead would release March the 1st next year. Okay? But the reason behind this is kind of interesting. So they are moving the game over to Unreal Engine 5 so they can take advantage of just all the benefits of that to help them achieve the open world. Does seem like a pretty late time to swap the game over. It would be a lot of work for a normal team, but they are stepping up. They're staffing to handle the pressure. Now, a slight problem there is the way that they're doing this, which certainly I'll say is innovative.
I don't know if it's innovative. I'm not sure if it's innovation to go, we need a load of people to do this, and we're not going to pay you. Come on ahead.
Innovative with a wink and a nod. So they're accepting volunteers. And there's two types of volunteer. Okay, so you can be a full-time volunteer where you will work for a salary.
Oh. All right, okay.
So I think that's called having a job. Then there are part-time volunteers. Anyone can be a part-time volunteer to contribute to the fantastic community and get cool rewards. Participation certificates. Wow. Certificate of participation. Free codes as well. You could get a certificate and a free code.
Yeah, if you just make the game, you'll get it for free. Wonderful.
Yeah, now part-time volunteering includes various activities ranging from translating to community moderation. Part-time volunteers can also offer their unique skills to improve our project or create special new features. And I think the bit that matters the most there is just that, like, hey, work in the video game and don't be paid bit. Now, there are no opportunities open at the minute for full-time volunteers, otherwise known as contracted jobs.
Yeah. People must be happy to do it then, if that's the case. People must be actually picking
there
that
you
up.
go.
Wouldn't you want to be part of this incredible experience, the most wishlisted game on Steam the day before? Or as I like to call it, yesterday? But yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite funny. They have a Medium post on this, right? You know,
Very
what does
strange.
it mean to be a volunteer? Here it is, little 3-minute read. But to give you some of the highlights, they say here, essentially the word volunteer comes from the Latin word voluntarius, meaning willing or of one's own choice. Whatever you do in life, you only have two choices. Do it willingly or unwillingly. If you help a stranger carry heavy boxes into the house willingly, you enjoy it. If you carry those boxes in unwillingly, every moment is like torture. So volunteering means you bring a certain pleasantness to every action you take. Now, I think generally people are thinking about, volunteering at a charity to help those who are in need. Not necessarily volunteering your labor for a project that you're not going to be compensated for, but the people who own the company are. That's weird.
Yeah, that's I think interesting, because obviously they kind of go a little bit of that where they say, it means a person works willingly for a common cause. And I think that's kind of weird, because obviously every time you volunteer, you would go, okay, well, you're sacrificing your time, your labor, your effort. Time you could be, you could be working a job, or you could be doing something a bit more enjoyable or something more meaningful to yourself. You're sacrificing that for something that you, I guess, consider greater than yourself. Yeah. Something like, you're helping feed people, or you're helping, rescue animals, stuff like that. Or even like volunteer fire services of helping people in need. And it's interesting that that's always the case where if you wanted to sell that, you would sell the cause. You would sell, hey, we know this is an ask, but this is great. But the way they've framed this isn't, you're going to be working, but your work will help this game become a fantastic game for the whole world to enjoy, for it's the most wishlisted, so many people have so much hope in this game, and you're going to make the best game ever. They're not doing that. They're saying, if you want to volunteer, that means all of the time that you will spend will be enjoyable, because you wouldn't do it if you don't enjoy it, right? And that's a really weird argument to bring to volunteering. That's a really strange one to me.
A bunch of that is true. It's just their usage of it is really weird, and the way that they're doing this is just kind of bizarre. So they actually told Eurogamer that, an example of some volunteer work where basically they got a translation studio to translate their previous game, the Prop Hunt one, and they found that the translation studio didn't do the best work ever. But they moved over to using volunteers, and, they found bugs, dealt with cheaters, did a bunch for their translation, organized some Discord communities. And here's the thing, that all, sounds great, but if you're getting people to do work for your project, you should pay them for that work. And translation is a very interesting thing. It's hard. A lot of people, because I know a lot of people play games who are from Germany, right? So a few people from Germany have asked me if we're going to be translating our game. To which I'm like, man, we might have 300,000 words, and that's 300,000 words of character dialogue. So not only do you have to translate it, but you have to translate it and everyone has to sound in character, and the meaning of something might be different in, say, the German cultural context than it will be in ours. So not only do you have to do the translation, but you actually might have to write something new to achieve the same effect because of different cultural, norms and standards and stuff like that. So translating is actually really, really, really hard work, and it does require a hell of a lot of creativity. And that is actually why a lot of people who maybe could go to a big translation house would be kind of afraid to do so, because you just can't really always guarantee that that level of like care and attention is going to be there.
Yeah, that's why you look at like Final Fantasy 14 as an example, and they have all of their localizations super, super, super tight to the game, because they know that they have to portray complicated ideas and complicated characters in a way that will work for everyone. So they have to like bake it in and discuss when they're writing it in Japanese. Okay, well, how can let's get the localization person in to talk about this and see what we're doing, because that stuff is really, really vital, and it's caused problems since the dawn of video games being translated, and then localization, how that fits in. It's honestly way, way harder than I think anyone gives it credit.
Yeah. So there's absolutely a reality where you get, let's just say, a few people in your community, maybe they're from Germany, maybe they read a lot of fantasy novels, they read a bunch of historical novels, whatever. So not only can they translate from English to German, but they actually have the creative experience and interest to do it well. So that is specialized, skilled labor.
Yeah.
So soliciting that work from your community could actually work out really well, but you have to pay them. Or I suppose they don't think they do, and I suppose they didn't have to.
Yeah.
Because they're able to get that work for free. And then for a lot of people, that's just weird. That's not the best way to do things.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting, because there's a couple ways to look at this all, because you can look at it from the angle of this is community involvement in a game. And I think a lot of the time people go, well, that's kind of fine. But there's like this really hard to define line where it kind of stops being a bit okay.
Yeah.
And I think you see that a lot in modding. And especially like when it comes to modding, like say Fallout London as an example, that's a case where you wouldn't expect Bethesda to really pay them specifically, because they're making their own creative work within the bounds of the engine.
Yes.
But then when it comes to the likes of like Durante making DS Fix and basically rescuing Dark Souls on PC, you can look at that and go, oh, well, that's work that FromSoft and Bandai Namco should have sorted. So he's kind of filling in the gap. So that's a case where if it turned out that they handed him a check for doing that, everyone would go, that's perfectly fine. You look at that and go, well, no, you've not done the job. So is this like really hard to define line where it kind of becomes okay and isn't okay?
Yeah, because ultimately they are asking, and people know what they're signing up for.
Yeah.
I think where it gets tricky is they say, here's one. Recently, one of our first volunteers in the Netherlands became a full-time internal volunteer, brackets employee, and more will be recruited.
Yeah.
So then you could say that they could dangle jobs in front of people and kind of use that to lead people on to do continued free development work on a volunteer basis.
An unpaid internship, effectively.
Yeah.
Which I think most people in the world would probably say, yeah, that's not really okay. It's like maybe... It's the awkward thing where in games it's like the size of fan projects, where it's like fan projects people volunteer all day long, but this isn't a fan project, this is a commercial thing. They've made 2 games that have sold quite a lot of copies.
Yeah, and like
so there's something going on where they're going to try to make profit off this unpaid internship.
Yeah, it's like, look, what happens, like this sells maybe 2 or 3 million copies, right? And I'm not talking about, what's like legal or anything, because you can just ask for volunteers and people will do it, and that's fine. You don't have to pay them. Like, you don't have to. But I think a lot of people do like the idea of people being compensated for the work. So let's just say this being the most wish-listed game on Steam gets 500,000 first week sales, ends up selling 2.5 million copies. And maybe that's a conservative estimate. Who the hell knows, really? But let's just say it is that runaway success. It's a bit weird if that happens off the back of a bunch of unpaid labor where there is no obligation to pay those people. Right? Like, that's pretty weird. The controlling shareholders of the company, by their net worth, get to be I mean, they already are probably, but, get to be multi-millionaires. And then you just have these legions of volunteers who have actually done a whole bunch of the grunt work who get nothing. It's like, yeah, they signed up for that, but that still doesn't mean it's... Like, it means it feels weird.
Yeah, and here's the one thing that I think, to me, kind of puts a bit of a massive asterisk on this, where if this were literally just a small indie project is asking for some volunteer translation, I'd be like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the reason this really speaks out to me is because it's obviously the most wishlisted game, so it's an exception by virtue of being so hyped and going to be worth so much money if it does release. This was supposed to be out. This was supposed to be out last week. And they delayed it by almost a full 9 months, basically, or about 9 months, the entire way to March. And the only reason they've given for that is that they're moving to Unreal Engine 5. That doesn't take 8 or 9 months. That isn't where the point where, oh, this game would be out, but we need a load of volunteers to do a load of different little work, little bits and bobs. It seems to me entirely like they have done something horrendously wrong in the middle of their development. And a lot of this is just kind of speculation from my end. But you don't need a whole bunch of volunteers doing all this additional support work if your game was about to release. And I don't think 9 months delay for porting to the new thing makes sense, because the game's nearly out. There may be a chance where, maybe they just wanted to make a load of improvements and the game would have been fine to release. But everything about this project, especially given the games that they've already worked on, I assume they've just put together a really nice trailer that didn't sell anything, but had lots of wish lists.
Yeah.
And then they just couldn't implement it.
It's like the Hytale situation.
And now they have to make up shit to push it back.
Like, Hytale has its trailer and fucking captures so many people's imaginations. But then for whatever reason, internally things change. They have to push the date a hell of a lot back. And they probably didn't intend for things to go that way. But yeah, like it is what it is. Problems crop up.
Yeah.
So it's always sort of tricky when you're dealing with fan expectations.
Indeed.
So basically, there you go. It's a bit of a strange situation. I think it does mean, though, that if you just want to be a game that ends up being a sleeper hit in Steam, there's just a little checkbox of things you can do, and seemingly it works.
All you have to do is do it vaguely right, because obviously we just earlier this week talking about Spellbreak didn't do very well, and it was just hey, here's a nice innovative take on a battle royale that's well executed. So it doesn't always work, but when it does, sometimes it does.
It should have been a Tarkov-like zombie survival MMO.
Yeah.
There you go, Spellbreak. Sorry. Apparently that's just what does well.
Yeah. Christ.
Oh, dear. Anyway, there you go. A bizarre story for you today. There will, of course, be more bizarre and, bizarre, newsworthy stories coming up in the future. So be sure for our next videos to stay tuned. Of course, there's been videos every single day for actually ages now. Because
almost every day,
yeah, because thanks to your support, we've sort of expanded the team, and we're really just able to do so much more here on this channel. So thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.